spirits and reading The New Yorker. My freshman year was spectacular, the best year of my life by far. We would saw Kurt Cobain smash his guitar up on stage. We used to take the bus to New York on the weekends just because we could. I learned that, unbeknownst to me, I'd been being oppressed by the patriarchy for 18 years and I was supposed to be mad about it and I never even knew. I thought, hallelujah, thank God I've arrived. This is who I'm supposed to be. So when, at the end of my freshman year, my mom told me that there was no more money for school and I was going to have to go back home to Ohio, I was devastated, the way that only someone who has gone to the promised land and been turned back at the last minute can be. I spent that year in Ohio, which should have been my sophomore year in DC, working as a cashier at Walmart, taking classes at the local community college, and trying to adjust to a life that no longer contained lattes or Thai food. My mom suggested that I think of my time in DC as a year abroad. Somebody who went away for a little while and came back and nothing really changed. But fortunately, that wasn't the case, and through some very fancy financial aid wrangling, the statute of limitations on which is hopefully expired, I went back to DC at what would have been the beginning of my junior year, and I came in triumphant, like somebody who had won a war out of town and come back to tell the story. But a lot had changed. A year's a long time in college, and I was academically a year behind my class. My friends had changed, as 19-year-olds are wont to do, and I was poor, like, devastatingly poor, like, no money for the bus, no money for my phone bill, ramen noodles every night poor. And after 2 more years of that, of working 2 minimum wage jobs and trying to catch up with my classes, and just generally not really keeping my head above water, I dropped out in this spring semester of what would have been my senior year, just as all the friends I started with were graduating and moving to Brooklyn to become dot-com millionaires. But I had no intention whatsoever of going back to Ohio. In fact, for years, I never went home for more than 48 hours because I was terrified that they were going to find a way to keep me there. In order to stay in DC, I needed a job that was going to let me collect myself and get my head above water a little bit and figure out the next steps. And I found it when I started working at Murphy's of DC. Well, the thing you have to know is that my father was a career bartender, and my stepfather was a career alcoholic, so between the two of them, I spent more time in bars before I was 15 than most people do before they're 30, and I immediately felt comfortable and happy and at home at Murphy's. And I love the friends that I made there. 15 years later, some of them are still my best friends, and at 21, I was really enjoying the perks of the service industry lifestyle, which include cash in your pocket every day, which was a big relief, unlimited access to booze, which is every 21-year-old's dream, the ability to sleep till noon, and plenty of sexual intrigue with my coworkers. So, in fact, it was so good that after a few months I started to think, well, maybe this is who I'm supposed to be. This is a pretty good life. And so it was one hot August evening. I was at my first or second or seventh bar, something like that in the night, and this really cute Irish boy asked me to go with him to a new place I had never heard of called Sugar's. And because I've always been kind of an accent whore, and I've had a lot to drink, I said, of course, person I don't know, I'll get in the car with you and go somewhere I've never heard of. But as soon as I got in the car, I started to think, maybe it wasn't my best decision, because he drove me far away from Murphy's of DC and into what was, at the time, a really shady part of Shaw. And my instincts got even more alarmed when Sugar's turned out to be not a bar, but a row house. And not just a row house, but as we stepped inside, a row house full of people doing massive amounts of drugs. There was, everyone was smoking weed, people were cutting lines on the tables, and money was openly changing hands. And as I started to sort of take that in, I noticed that while there were very few women there, I was one of the only ones whose clothing adequately covered her vagina. At that tender point in my life, I had never actually seen pimps and prostitutes before. It turns out that, like pornography, you know it when you see it. And so, I turned to my adorable Irish friend, who was, I now noticed, rubbing his nose a lot, and I said, oh gosh, you know what, thank you so much for the ride, I really appreciate it, but out by yourself, if you know what I mean. It's probably not safe for you to be walking around out there, so why don't you just sit tight and I'll see you home later. He was the leprechaun from the Leprechaun Book. And because this was like 1997 and no one had cell phones and I couldn't call for help, I did. I was immediately, despite my 18 beers earlier in the evening, as sober as I have ever been in my entire... Every fight or flight instinct that I have was on full alert, and I sat there with my eyes glued on that door like I had never have before, because I knew that some sort of massacre was about to break out and I was going to have to run for my life. At the same time, I was trying really hard not to make eye contact with anybody, because I was equally afraid that they were going to try to sell me drugs or co-opt me into a life of prostitution, and I didn't want anything to do with either one of those things. And I was also thinking about how sad my mom was going to be when she found out that I died in a crack house full of doors. More than that, I was weighing all the decisions I'd made that led me to this point. I'm thinking, really, Cara? Really? Is this who you're supposed to be? We did get out of there, spoiler alert, when the sun was up and it was already hot and sticky and gross out, and I had a shift starting at Murphy's in just a few hours, which I made it through somehow. But when my shift was over that night, for the first time all summer, I didn't go out drinking with my friends. I'd like to say that what I did was go camp out at the registrar's office at GW and register for fall classes, so I could get my life back on track toward becoming America's next top Cara foreign. But you don't figure out who you are overnight in your 20s. What I've learned since is that it's a lifelong process and there really is kind of no end goal. It goes on and on. But what I did learn that summer is that while you may not figure out who you are overnight, there are some nights you spend when you figure out who you are definitely not. And I built my night of thinking I was going to die at a crack/whorehouse.